Hello, I'm JJ. I eat a mostly meat diet, and I am a life coach.
And I'm her husband, Eric, and I am a novelist.
And today we're going to talk about a subject that is more sensitive, very serious, and talk about our experience with the carnivore diet and mental health.
Yeah, it's something that I got interested in after hearing a podcast with Dr. Chris Palmer, whose book Brain Energy just talks about these amazing transformations his patients, he's a psychiatrist, his patients underwent when they went on keto. And I started to think, well, maybe this is something that I need to try again. I'd done keto and it hadn't particularly helped my particular issue, but his whole model of mental health being a metabolic issue rather than maybe a neurochemistry one only was quite intriguing to me.
Yeah.
Plus, people who get onto keto after being on a SAD diet talk about the energy they get from the ketones and stuff like that. Did you experience any of that?
I feel like I've been overall, I haven't had any depression in several years. It's been about 6 years since I've experienced depression. It doesn't correspond with my diet per se, except for the reduction in wheat. When I cut out wheat, it was a dramatic change for me in my mental health. What I do notice now is that I have some more energy, and more recently I've been experimenting with eating higher fat. And I've noticed, it's only been a few days, I've noticed that I feel extremely peaceful and calm shortly afterward, which is just,
That's interesting.
it's very interesting. So I would say overall, I think it has improved my mood, but I haven't had any serious mental health issues since or prior to going carnivore.
I have a long history of mental health troubles, although I didn't know it. It's just one of the ironic things about it is that when you live with it for so long, you just think that you're just not as maybe as flexible or as resilient as other people. And you don't actually realize that you have a serious mental health problem. And mine manifested dramatically as health anxiety, which is very specific and used to be called hypochondriasm or something, hypochondriac. And many people who have this problem will go to the doctor with every little complaint. I was very doctor averse, and so I would suffer in silence with my symptoms until I could no longer tolerate it, and then I would go to the doctor and my suffering would be multiplied many times. And over the years, I would have these cycles of having some strange, sensation in my body, and my mind would just start to just latch onto it. And there was one period where I was convinced I had ALS. And because I had a lot of muscle twitches and I felt like my legs were getting weaker and looking back on it, there was a lot of things going on, probably in my diet, but also in my work life at the time that was extremely stressful. I was absolutely miserable in my career. And but it was so debilitating that I kind of just gave up. But I didn't have ALS.
Spoiler alert,
Yeah.
Good news, didn't have it.
And so then I kind of came out of that. But then every few months, there'd be another little weird sensation or pain or constriction in my chest or who knows what it was. And it would always be like my mind would just latch onto it and it couldn't stop thinking about it and catastrophizing it. And it turns out, long story short, that health anxiety is now really considered a form of OCD. So there's this obsessive compulsive quality to it where the compulsion is to check your sensations, and the obsession is about not letting go of the catastrophic thought. And it's very much a cycle of you have a sensation, you do your Google research, which terrifies you. I learned long ago never to do that. Never Google your symptoms. Then you start doing this reassurance seeking where you're trying to get maybe it's something else. Maybe it's something less dire. And then you might get a temporary relief. And that little burst of temporary relief is a reward. And that tells the whole system, this is good. reassurance seeking will give you a burst of relief. And then the symptom will reoccur or rise again, and the thoughts will start again, the searching will start again, the catastrophizing will start again, and then you'll go to the doctor, you'll go through a battery of tests. The tests will come back negative, huge relief, big reward for all of this, the anxiety. And that cycle will continue for as long as you live.
And it's a very debilitating cycle. It does affect the family life. It does affect the home. There's, I know when you've been in cycles of that, there's very little going outside of the home.
Yeah, you do get that. What do you call that? That fear of just leaving home. There's a specific word for it.
So it's a big, it affects the life in a huge, huge way.
Now I knew, because I'm a pretty rational person, and I would try to rationalize, like, well, what the thing I fear is the worst case, rarest scenario. But because I couldn't eliminate it, from be certain it wasn't that.
You'd say, but it's possible.
And that possibility was too much for how my mind worked to tolerate. And it resulted in long periods of depression. And when you feel like your health is failing, you start to feel frail and you don't want to exert yourself.
Yes,
So
no exertion.
There'd be periods of time where I was really worried about my heart health because, my cholesterol was always high and the doctors were always like, that's terrible. And so I would have pressure or maybe even pain. And there was a few occasions where we went to the ER.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any heart disease, and I still don't. No matter how many tests I had, whether it was a nuclear stress test or a CT angiogram,
And you had them.
CAC scores,
Yes.
I just could never eliminate the 0.01% chance from my mind. Now, that's not irrational to be fearing the 0.001% chance. It's just like it's irrational to fear flying. And yet, for me, getting on board the plane and taking off was another one of those things where it was just like my heart would be pounding, my palms would be sweaty, my mouth would go dry, and my mind would be in extreme vivid detail seeing the catastrophe that could be about to happen. And even hearing the newscast of the disaster, which makes me a good novelist.
Yes, it does.
Makes me a terrible human being, like not as a bad person, but just not effective at living day-to-day life.
No.
So I tried cognitive behavioral therapy, which made everything worse. Because I think it was the way I was taught to do it, but the process was like, well, list what your fear is, what your state of anxiety is. Now list what's a more rational, more likely explanation. And I would do that. I'm like, yeah, but there's a possibility it's not that. So whole body is just like, this is a 5-alarm fire. Meditation made it much worse because there's this aspect that a lot of people talk about. You need to get in touch with your body and maybe there's emotions trapped in the chest or the gut or whatever. And it's just your body's way of expressing suppressed trauma. Well, maybe, but the more in touch I was with body sensations, the more anxious I was. And
don't even get you on breathing.
Yeah.
Like,
if it was a breathing exercise, it made me super conscious of my heart palpitations, which made my anxiety just rev up.
Yeah.
It was so stupid. Like everything you're supposed to do made everything worse. I tried every supplement from 5-HTP and L-theanine and ashwagandha and magnesium and everything like that.
And every diet.
Every diet, including keto, although I wasn't trying to use keto for this particular thing. I was using keto to try to drop body fat and improve my LDL because I read Wheat Belly by Dr. Davis and others who were like, yeah, when my patients go on keto, they see their LDLs go way down and they become these big, fluffy, healthy, happy particles. Not me. And so I was trying to do keto to make myself invulnerable to heart disease.
Yes.
Which is not possible. You can't make yourself invulnerable. Now, you can improve your risks, but that's not what a health anxiety mind cares about. Health Anxiety Mind wants to eliminate all risk with 100%
Yep.
certainty,
Yep.
which, can't happen. At the Amen Clinic, getting a SPECT scan of my brain, I took all his supplements. That got me into, doing some therapy, which it helped in some ways, but intellectualizing the problem further didn't actually resolve any of the symptoms, and it didn't make me better able to ride the waves of anxiety that were kind of coming over me. So when I heard Dr. Palmer talking about the success he'd had, and that aligned with another podcast where the guy was talking about how people don't get enough protein. And I'm like, well, people need more protein, and this is going to help my mental health. Maybe carnivore is, I hadn't tried it yet. Maybe this is the thing I need to do. But prior to that, 2 years ago, I was so desperate, I finally gave in and started taking a course of SSRIs. SSRIs aren't really indicated for anxiety, but the particular one that she prescribed had some very small tests that showed effectivity with people with OCD issues. And that was vilazodone, brand name Viibryd. I would say after a couple of months, I think I was like, one day I was like,
Oh,
I feel good. I feel fine.
yeah. And living with him, I could see it decrease. You could see him doing this physical stuff, and he would do that all the time. It was constantly heart rubbing, stomach.
Yeah, I'd be
whatever.
constantly trying to rub muscles to try to release tension, hoping that it would stop whatever sensation I had.
Yeah. So I noticed living with him that there was definitely a reduction in those responses
Yeah.
pretty quickly.
I was very skeptical about taking any meds. I've always been kind of like that. I didn't want to take my statin. I do take the antibiotic when I absolutely have to. But it worked.
It worked.
And, I had been, this had been a decades-long problem, and it affected how I was as a father, how I was able to show up as a dad. It obviously affected how I was as a husband. I was very lucky to have this person be my wife who was able to tolerate me for those years. It affected what I was able to do just for exercise, for leisure activities, because I became very, very constrained about my willingness to go out and about. Because if I went into a crowded situation, I would have anxiety issues
even if the lighting,
instantly.
even the lighting could,
Yeah.
it was a lot.
I stayed on the SSRI, I went on Carnivore, had a lot of other benefits with acid reflux going away, IBS going away, my blood pressure totally normalized, dropped some body fat, my recovery after workouts, I wouldn't have as bad of delayed onset muscle soreness. And I was, after about a year and a half, I was starting to entertain the idea. I'm like, maybe it's time to wean off of this and see how it goes. And I did that I did this past fall. It's been 4 months since I dropped the last small dose of my SSRI.
Only right now, it's been 4 months.
It's been 4 months.
It feels like it's been longer.
September 28th. I followed a doctor protocol. I don't just do what Michaela Peterson did and just stop taking them.
No.
That's not advised. And obviously, I'm not a doctor, and neither are you, so we can't tell you what to do.
No. I was a little apprehensive about him going on. I wanted him to, and always thinking that, and he can go back on them if he needs to. Yeah.
And I was not 100% committed to quitting. I was like, I will drop the dose and I will live with that for a week. And if I drop it and I can't handle it, I'll go right back. I'm not going back to that life that I had before. Symptom-wise, I was really concerned about withdrawal because I had read all of the nightmares about brain zaps and who knows what else, and bad insomnia. I already had bad insomnia, so I wasn't that worried about it getting worse. Dr. Palmer, in his book, describes protocols that are much, much longer. He said that for long-term SSRI users, it can take a year to wean down, and he talks about using a blade to cut off grains of the pill in order to wean very, very slowly. And he also advocates staying at a lower dose for a longer period of time. I didn't because, well, one, I hadn't been on it that long. And two, I was like, well, let me just do the way things I always do, which is too fast.
Yeah.
My experience of the withdrawals was very mild. The first day, I would start to have a little bit of a weird headache. It wasn't a severe headache, but it was an unusual sensation headache. The next day, I would feel like my brain was full of kind of a fuzzy, staticky kind of quality, but it wasn't like lightning bolts of anything. It was just sort of like like as if you hadn't slept for 2 or 3 days, kind of a exhaustion of brain. And then the next few days, there'd be a slow sort of recovery of just kind of feeling normal, maybe a little tired. And then I would get to the next, point where I would cut the dose and I'd kind of experience that again. This is, N of 1. Who really knows? Which is what I always say in every video. Who really knows? Is I just think having all of that protein, all that fat, those ketones, were there to support my brain during that withdrawal phase. And maybe it made what could have been bad withdrawals much less. I've heard others have that experience, you could have them do some sort of random controlled trial and it would show some statistical significance maybe, but what difference does it make? If your experience is easy, it's good. From an energy level, I don't get the afternoon dips, obviously, when eating this way.
Oh, yes.
I rarely ever need a nap unless I've had many days of bad sleep.
I used to regularly need the afternoon nap.
Do I feel like I'm on a limitless pill by eating this way? No. Do I feel like I need carbs for my workouts? No.
And remarkably, you've heard us talk on other videos too. He can look at his lipid panel and not think he's going to die tomorrow.
This is actually really important.
This is really big.
I would get a notification from the hospital or from Quest that my blood results were in for anything. It didn't matter what it was. Seeing that notification made my heart rate double. Just with like, what am I going to find out? Just the anticipation of seeing the numbers. And of course, when you open your Quest results, certain things are in red. And for the health anxious, a red means you're dead. You're dying. This is a severe problem.
And not in years. Like, it's going to happen soon.
The last time I got my notification, my results were in, I had this a little bit sort of like a jumpy kind of like a interested feel, but it was nothing like the ka-toom, boom, 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 boom. I'd get that thinking about getting the results. Yeah. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I haven't gotten the results. I'm going to get them soon. And my heart rate would go way up. Totally. I mean, no part of my rational mind is involved in that reaction. Mm-mm. And there's no possible way of reasoning yourself out of your body reacting before the thought can really register. Mm-hmm. It's horrible. But now on Carnivore, it's much, much smoother.
You said you explained, luckily you're a good communicator because you've been able to tell me about this whole process. Mm-hmm. And you've said that you feel like you have more space. Yes.
There's this thing that I think that the SSRI did that I think Carnivore is also doing, is I still get the catastrophic thought occasionally. Instead of it just immediately attaching to the carousel and whipping around endlessly, I'm able to look at the thought and there's enough space for me to say, no, stay off. Mm-hmm. And then I can turn my attention to something else and my brain doesn't immediately just grab it anyway. And I can continue with some other task, some other thought, some other project. And then later I'll go, oh yeah, there was that thought that I had and it doesn't bother me. Mm-hmm. I'm not worried about it. It doesn't mean that I have no fear of death or sickness or anything like that. I'm still a regular, normal, mortal human. But I'm able to endure it and buffer it like, I think, a fairly well-adjusted person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So have you had issues with health anxiety? Has Carnivore helped you? Has keto helped you? Or did you come to this video looking for some sort of help? I can't make any promises to you. It's a process. But it worked for me.
It did. Yeah. So thank you for tuning in. Like, subscribe, and please leave a comment on any mental health issues that maybe you've seen Carnivore help with, or even if it hasn't, what has been your strategy? So we'll see you in the next video.
Bye.
Bye.